everybody. I'm Ron Gray with Conversations That Matter. We are sitting down with one of the most important friends in my life, Ninfa Floyd. She came from Cuba 57 years ago, and we are here today to talk about her experience and to talk about immigration, one of the most important issues in our country right now. So thanks for joining us, and welcome to my friend Ninfa. Well, tell us your experience as a child growing up in Cuba.
Do you have 5 hours?
We do, but we'll have to edit it down.
Darn. No.
You have a compelling story, and I hope that the audience will hear your story and understand the challenges that come with leaving your home country, going to any country for that matter. So let's dive right in.
Sorry, so a little background on me is that I was destined, I thought, for the rest of my life to live in my beautiful paradise of an island of Cuba. Well, it didn't happen that way. So we have no control of our futures as we think that we do. I was a happy camper. I had never had peanut butter and jelly.
Wow.
I had never spoken a word of English. I was just happy in Cuba. It was a wonderful country. It was, for me, what I knew
That was
culturally
the
growing
you knew.
up.
Yeah.
And so one day things changed, and my parents made a very courageous decision, and that was to send us to the United States, and they did not get to leave Cuba for a couple of years, but they sent us to the United States because they knew and they saw and they perceived and they knew that Cuba was turning into what had been the hope of democracy into a communist state. And so rather than seeing us grow up with a lack of freedom, they made that decision. And I think it's important that people realize that, particularly for children, and that's my issue right now with what is happening with these children that have been taken from their parents. Children don't have a voice. My decision to come to this country was not made by me. It was made by my parents.
Right.
And they did it with the best of intentions. And it worked out for us.
Yeah.
But obviously that's
for
not the
some.
way it works out for everybody.
Right.
And so the Cuban exile experience is different from what is happening right now. We were not rich, but we were not economically hurting in Cuba. We essentially came, as most Cubans came, was to seek freedom. And because, you know, the United States was the beacon of freedom, and hopefully will still continue to be that for the world.
Right.
But so our exile experience was different in that way, that because we were in the middle of the Cold War in the 60s, and I came in 1961, we were very welcomed in this country. As a matter of fact, we didn't have to go through all the government red tape and of becoming a resident and a citizen and having to wait sometimes 15, 20 years for that dream to come true.
Right.
We were given special privileges because of Cuba, because we were fleeing Russia/Cuba, communism. And at that time, communism was the biggest threat or the biggest danger
to our country.
World. And that's what they were dealing with. So the Cuban immigration situation has always been different. We were always, not that it wasn't hard when we got here, because it certainly was.
Yeah.
But we were given residency and citizenship within 5 years.
Did you have family here or a sponsor here when you came over before your parents? How did that look?
Well, we were lucky that I had an aunt and an uncle that had already left Cuba, not for political reasons, just because they were college professors, and they got good positions in Brevard, North Carolina, at a private college there called Brevard College.
Yeah.
So they were both professors there. And that was my mother's sister, my tia Viola, my aunt Viola, and they agreed to take me in. So I came separately from my brothers.
Wow.
I came with a cousin
Okay.
who I look at as being my brother, because
Yeah.
we experienced the strangeness of this crazy land.
Yeah.
And when you're a little kid
Yeah.
and you're 12 years old and you don't speak the language,
Yeah.
and everything that you've ever known is taken away from you,
Yeah.
and you are listening people sounding like Russia, sounding so strangely,
Right.
and eating all these. I go back to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah.
That was to me the worst thing I could have ever eaten.
Really?
I said, what do Americans eat?
Yeah.
Peanut butter and jelly. And,
It's one of my favorite things.
yeah, I know. It's become one of mine too.
Has it? Yeah.
But back then,
Well, it's a
just
symbol,
it's a
in a way.
symbol for
Yeah.
me. And I think that even though we do not have the background for the immigration that is going on right now with the poor countries in Central America and Latin America, the feeling of coming to a new land, it's the same for everybody.
Right. I mean, the fear as an adolescent coming here, because the life you knew was okay, you weren't seeing the forecast that your parents saw with communism coming in and taking over. So you were a happy child. Did that bring an element of escalated fear because you were leaving a happy life and having to come to a new land with a new language in a place without your siblings, without your parents?
We were always told, when my parents decided and told us that we were going to be moved to the United States, that it was not going to be permanent,
Oh,
because they never thought Fidel Castro would last.
and they believed that.
And
It
they
wasn't
believed that.
something they
So
were
it
just
was
telling
not
you.
going to be a permanent thing.
Right.
So that's how we were told. So then we came here, but the feeling, I have some words here that I think are very important to me. Pain, you're disoriented, because you're fracturing your identity.
Yeah.
You're now, there's a divorce, there's a brokenness from the person that you were all your life in your culture
Right.
to a person that wants to stay that way but can't because of the cultural differences.
Right.
And because of all the different ideas and things that you have to deal with, including, and the worst one of all, is a new language. You have anxiety for the unfamiliar. You feel loneliness. You
Yeah.
feel uprooted. And you question, why? Why am I having to go through all this? Why can't I go back to my country?
Without the skill set at that age to really know how to
Exactly.
manage all those emotions.
Yeah.
And much like what's going on now.
Exactly. It's like you become like you're in a book and you're the protagonist of a story that now your past has become your past, and you have to somehow write new chapters in your life. And you're young and you're
As
a
a child.
kid and you don't know how to do that. So I, believe it or not, was a very extroverted little girl. And I think I'm back to myself now. But I became very shy and very introverted because I was afraid to open my mouth. I was afraid that I looked different, and I did. I had pierced ears. And trust me, in North Carolina, in a little village of 5,000 people, having someone come with holes in their ears and earrings in their ears was completely like, wow for them.
Literally
Why do you
foreign.
have holes in your ear? That wasn't done back then.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was kind of, in many ways, in a zoo. I was this exquisite creature.
Yeah.
My cousin too.
Yeah.
But we wanted to fit in, and yet we didn't know yet how to do that. It was, I was feeling that I wasn't even there in my country, but I wasn't even here. And I know that that's the same feeling that everybody that leaves their country behind.
Right.
And
Whether you're
nobody
a child
chooses
or
to do
an
that.
adult. Yeah.
Why would anybody leave the country that
Right.
they love
Right.
unless they have to?
Yeah, I think that's some of what we're missing as a society that's privileged to live in such a free land and in a true democracy. I don't think we as a whole understand the consequences of folks that live in Central America and Latin America and why they are rushing to the border. Poor economic conditions, lack of food and water, gangs and cartels, the violence around that, and
Right.
even sometimes political persecution. So what do you say to folks that don't understand why people are flooding to America, that don't see the conditions that are causing people to leave their home countries when a lot of times they don't want to leave? How do we help our communities understand that it's not all drug dealers and rapists, that it's families just begging to survive?
This is a hard question to answer. Now, I don't have the answers, but I do know this. I do know that we fear the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I speak for many friends that I have, and I'm, from what I read in the majority of Americans, is that they fear what they do not know. Mm-hmm. And empathy in human beings can only go so far. We can have empathy for all those poor kids that are coming over and all that, but mm-hmm. eventually, sadly enough, we go back to our own little lives, our own little oases, mm-hmm. our own children, what we're involved with, and it's hard to feel empathy mm-hmm. and hold that for a long, long time when we don't have, and Americans do not have, they're privileged, they do not have that feeling of having been rootless
right.
and having been taken out of their country for whatever reasons.
Right.
We can only read it in stories,
mm-hmm.
and I don't know how to keep this up front. Mm-hmm. Like already right now, the conversation has switched. Mm-hmm. The immigration issues with these poor children, they're still there. They're still not reunited with the parents.
They're just not
but
on
our
mainstream
mindset is gone. Yeah. It's another things,
right.
and I don't know what the answer is. I think mm-hmm. just educating at the basic, in town halls, in town meetings, having people come and say, hey, I'm an immigrant, mm-hmm. and I work hard for my money, and what I want is to be part of this American dream. Mm-hmm. Help me. Mm-hmm. I think also, Ron, an important thing is, and I'm going to throw a question at you. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sure that you probably, when you were growing up and you heard about the melting pot. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean to you?
To me, it means that we are a nation of immigrants. Okay. We are a community of very diverse, different people with different backgrounds, different looks, different languages, different perceptions about what the world looks like, and all of that makes up a community.
But you're not looking at the word melting. Because the
Tell
melting
us about
pot,
that. Yeah.
The melting pot, and it's what I have heard that critically so many times when people can be very rude. Mm-hmm. Why are you so Cuban? You're an American, and honest to God, that has been told to me. You're an American now. Mm-hmm. You speak the American language.
Right.
Why are you so Cuban? And I always say to them, I'm as Cuban today as I was the day I left my country.
Yeah.
Leaving one's country doesn't mean giving up
your heritage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to quote somebody because I put you on the spot. I'm ready for this one.
That's great.
Somebody that I admire, and sadly enough is not admired or respected by many in this country, I think, Jimmy Carter. Mm-hmm. And this is
great humanitarian.
A great humanitarian.
Yeah.
I don't care how you like him or not like
mm-hmm.
him. He said, we become not a melting pot, and I thought about this for so long, but a beautiful mosaic, which is kind of what you said, mm-hmm. different people, different beliefs, different yearnings, different hopes, and different dreams.
Yeah.
So added to that, I kind of feel like this country should be like a big salad. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody has different ingredients to put into the salad. You have tomatoes and mm-hmm. onions, and you even have artichokes mm-hmm. and corn and carrots or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you put them on there separately. Mm-hmm. And what do you become? It doesn't melt. It's all part of that salad.
Yeah.
I never melted.
Yeah.
I did not melt, and I refused to at my age to
That's
melt
a great analogy.
into this melting pot analogy.
Yeah. Well,
that is a bunch of
for so long, I have heard people say they don't see color. Well, on one hand, I think it's important to live our lives in a way that we don't make a difference because of our color, but it's important to see color for this reason. to see our differences and to rally around those and learn about those differences, not be divided because of our differences, but understand that we are different. And that difference can educate me. It can allow me to foster empathy in my life. And to see and hear your story really, I think, is the breeding ground for me wanting to find a way to connect with you because of your difference. And, you know, whether it's a tomato or a carrot in that salad, you know, we are one salad now,
Yeah.
but we should celebrate and acknowledge our differences because we can learn so much from them. But I think in a lot of ways, our society fears those differences, just like you said. And that drives an indifference between us at the ballot box.
Absolutely.
It drives a difference between us on public or on what am I trying to say? Cable news, and it in a lot of ways it's used for one's own agenda, especially in the political arena. But if we, I have this theory that I'm sharing through
Okay.
Conversations That Matter, is that I think we all have more in common than we have different, even though it's important to celebrate our differences because we can gain so much from that. It's important to get to know each other, and that's what I want the audience to do, is get to know you as an immigrant who's been here 57 years. You're still part of that salad, but you know, you're a very bright, flavorful tomato.
Okay.
But I think if we could get to know each other more and understand that we have a lot more in common than we have different, even though you grew up as a child in Cuba and came here as an adolescent or teenager, and my story is very different. Then we could lead with our commonality and develop empathy to be more open to different political ideology even, instead of leading with our differences. And that brings us to another part of the conversation, is what's going on now in our country with the administration's efforts to build a wall. We've got border separation among families, and we've touched on that a little bit. We've got unaccompanied minors showing up in court hearings because they're here illegally and their parents have been deported. And you know, we've had 3,000 kids separated from their parents this year alone, at last count. I think if we could get to a place where we hear each other and learn about each other and have more empathy for each other's story, then we could tear down that wall. It's a figurative wall right now.
Yes, it is.
We don't need a wall. We need to embrace the humanity of people that are trying to survive.
Absolutely.
What do you say to a community that just doesn't understand that? And I think a lot of folks just aren't as informed maybe as we should be. And how do we help our communities understand the importance of standing in the gap for those folks that are running from Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, because of violence in their countries, because of the gangs and cartels and poor economic conditions? How do we embrace those folks and help those folks and convince our communities that we don't need to build a wall to then turn our back to the folks that are trying to climb it? Instead, infuse a little more humanity into our policies and develop some empathy. How do we do
How do you
that?
develop empathy? That's just it. Ron, I don't have the answer, but I think that it has to come from an innate sense of humanity, and it has to come from a little knowledge about the history of this country. And I think, sadly enough, many Americans nowadays, and I'm talking about in their 20s and even in their 30s and 40s, they don't even have an idea of their background, of their families. And they forget that this nation was based and built, a lot of it, on slave labor.
Yeah.
You know, from Africa, slaves that came and built this nation in this country because of that. They don't think about that. How do you get them to understand their own history so that they can still feel that that Statue of Liberty is, you know, is a beacon for everybody to come and to try to have a better life? I don't know. I think part of the problem is also that this nation, you have to think about it, and this is how I cut slack to the United States. It's a continent. This is a continent. And think about it. How many states do we have? How many states do we have? Think of each one of those as being a country. Because in Europe,
that's what it is.
A continent has many different countries. France, Germany, you know, Spain, Italy. So all those countries are countries, and it's a smaller problem to handle. We have a gigantic continent with a zillion different people that have different ideas, and some are more progressive than others. I think it's just a lack of cohesiveness in the knowledge of history. That when their ancestors came to this country, they came here for the same reason as they're coming from Latin America right now. They were just European. You know, it's the Native Americans, we put
Same
them away
conditions,
in a reservation. Okay, so the Europeans come and settle here. Then you've got the Africans that were brought in here as slaves to work in the plantations, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. It's not only Central
and
and Latin America.
No, it's this country has a history of that. We are a country that is made up of that history. And so how do you get people to remember that? You have to have a government that upholds laws, but that it does it with kindness. It does it with kindness and goodwill. We've always been like that. Listen, the immigration problem has been happening from way back, and it's a broken system. Nobody has ever decided or has come up with a good idea. But the idea to build a wall, it's just beyond my comprehension how they actually can think that a physical wall, it's going to keep people, like let's say my father, who at 47 years old, left Cuba. He was a famous doctor in Cuba, a cardiologist, and he gave it all up to come to this country. Nothing would have stopped him. If he had to swim with sharks, he would have to get here. So that is just, to me, so ludicrous to think that that can save us from the bad people that are coming over. Hey, not everybody's a jewel in this country. Not every American is a jewel in this country. Yes, there are some people that are coming over that maybe are taking advantage. But whatever it is, you don't malign a whole movement seeking freedom. And that's what they are. They are a movement of people that don't have anything and that would love to not leave their country. They would love to stay there.
Yeah.
But
that leads me into my next discussion. I feel like we as a country are so reactive to the problems around illegal immigration. I often wonder, what is our country, what is our State Department doing to help the governments of Latin America, Central America, build an economic structure so that folks can have a chance in their home countries? What are we doing to help those countries and NGOs to combat the violence around gangs and cartels? It's almost like we've lost a sense of our humanity and just want to shut people off. And we can't do that. We're meant to connect. We're meant to support. We're meant to help each other. And I feel like there's ways that we can help those countries build a better future. Do you feel like we're doing that?
No, we're not doing that.
Do you feel like people understand that's an important component to this instead of just building the wall and saying we turn our back?
No, I think that, I'm not an expert, a history expert on Latin America and Cuba. Well, I am in Cuba and the United States. But the history of the United States with Central America and South America has never been a good one. We have always looked at our southern neighbors are lesser than we are. Because, and I truly believe it's because of the native, the Aztecs, the Mayas, those are Indians, they're not white. So therefore, whether we realize it or not, automatically we subjugate them to a different economic level. Those countries themselves have issues and have problems, and those countries themselves have to be responsible for what they do. The governments of those countries have to also step up. But sadly enough, in the way the history of that area was when it was when they were all colonies of Spain, it's the culture of this macho thing, of the caudillo, that strong man that is the governor, the government, the president, who has then not helped. They've created their own peers of economic, and so it's very complex. But we have never really joined as looking at our southern neighbor and saying, let's build a strong alliance. Let's help each other out. Yes, historically there have been many treaties and many good ones, but they are kind of not, they're overlooked. They're not in place. They're our best traders. South America, they're our neighbors. And yet we look to China and we look to Europe. We look the other way.
If your neighbor fell on hard times, if she was in a domestic dispute with her partner, or if your neighbor behind us fell on hard times and didn't have money for food or groceries, we wouldn't build a wall.
No, we wouldn't.
In your yard to block those folks off. I feel like it's the same thing. Of course, I don't know anybody that wants open borders.
No, but nobody wants open borders.
Yeah, but it's more complex than that. There's no simple answer. If there was, we would have written it decades ago. But to simply build a wall to separate us from our neighbors and turn our backs and sip our wine and float in our pools is inhuman to me.
It is.
It is, it's ungodly, it's immoral, it's unholy.
Yeah.
And I think we as a Christian, predominantly Christian nation, we've lost our way because of this idea of building a wall and turning our backs on our neighbors. We would never do that in our own communities.
No, we wouldn't. Well, I don't know. But think about it. Think about this. Think about the DACA children. I was a professor at Bluegrass Community and Technical College. I have many of those students.
And for our audience that may not understand what DACA is, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals.
Right.
Let me explain the standards around that, the parameters around that. Individuals were able to request DACA status if they were under the age of 31 on June 15th, 2012, when President Obama made the executive order and created DACA. If they came to the U.S. before turning 16 and continuously lived in the country since June 15th, 2007. Individuals had to have a high school diploma or be in school, be honorably discharged from the military, and recipients could not have a criminal record. That didn't provide legal status, it just deferred the risk of them being deported, right? And we're still in a mess around DACA, but talk about that and your experience with your students.
Yeah, these kids are wonderful. These kids are first of all, hey, they're bilingual.
Yeah.
They speak 2 languages. That's more than many of my other students can do, because they're learning hola, ¿cómo está usted? Really? Okay, come on. It's hola, ¿cómo está usted?
Yeah.
They're learning for the first time, when they're 18, 17 years old, they're attempting to learn a language. These kids are bilingual, and they're studying, and they are my best students.
Yeah.
And they have been my A students and my B students, and so here's what I get. Well, of course they're going to make A's and B's. They speak Spanish, don't they? You see? But
It's
my
the whole
reply to
attitude
that
around it.
is,
Yeah.
okay, you speak English. Every class you take is in English. How come you're making D's and C's?
Right.
Give me a break.
Yeah.
That is a horrible analogy. That
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. And so, how fair is it? These kids, there should not even be a question whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent,
Yeah.
whatever, a human being.
Yeah,
There
it's
should be
not
no
a liberal,
question
conservative
that these
issue. It's a
kids
human
should
issue.
be immediately
Yeah.
be granted citizenship.
Yeah.
Period. There shouldn't even be a problem with
Right.
it. They
Right.
are Americans.
Yeah. Well, they were brought here, much like you. Thank God,
Exactly.
a different time for you.
Oh, exactly. Hey, I was a citizen within 5 years.
Yeah, challenging in its own way, but a different time. However, these kids are fleeing persecution and poverty and violence.
And they came not by their choice.
They came not by their
And
choice.
I think that is
Yeah.
important. I think people need to realize that children that come to this country illegally come to this country not because they chose to. How can a 2-year-old choose that? Or a 5 or a 10-year-old? So the argument, well, the parents should know better. Well, you know, they do. It takes courage.
Yeah.
It takes courage for those parents to make that decision,
Right.
to cross that river,
Yeah.
and to take chances. Because they have the idea of a better life for
Right.
those kids.
Yeah, I think part of the lost conversation is, again, and we've talked somewhat about this. Why are they leaving? Why are they taking the chance of their lives, the risk of their lives,
The risk of their lives.
for the chance to survive?
Exactly.
And I think that conversation has to happen more. I think we have to acknowledge why they're escaping what they're escaping, and get to know those reasons and understand that, and then we could develop more empathy, and we could be more open-minded on policy evolution. You know, we can't still live by the laws of 1960, 70, 80.
No.
It has to evolve because international society evolves.
Right. And problems evolve, and different
Yeah.
problems come up.
Yeah.
But there has to be a consensus that these people have to be welcome. And that to label them criminals and rapists and to lump all these humans into those categories, to me, it's pathetic, and it lacks humanity.
It does.
It just lacks humanity.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It just does.
Yeah.
And I hear people that are good people that I consider good, probably because they've never thought about it. They're just programmed to think that. So I think that if at your own level of friends and your own level, you can educate people, not just through the way you are, but through not arguing, because I think this is ridiculous that
Yes.
we're arguing so much,
Yeah.
but just through saying, well, you know, think about that. Put yourself in those shoes. What will you do for your 5-year-old if in your hometown you were being persecuted and you were being threatened and you didn't have a job because you lost your job and you didn't agree? What do you do? People will say, well, we have that issue in the United States. Let's take care of our own first. And that really irks me.
And because that is the answer from so many, our policies lack humanity. How do we restore humanity into our public policy?
Oh, it's going to take a genius. It's going to take a Superman. I don't know who that person is, because I don't think it's going to happen, Ron. I look at what I just said about, how many people that I know are saying, we got to get rid of welfare because you know what, they're abusing it, and get to work. They're doing that to their own people. These, let's just say, forget immigrants. Let's say that you're in a ghetto in a big city, and people are saying welfare creates
Or
more
rural
poverty.
Kentucky.
Or rural Kentucky.
An hour east of
and
where we are.
We're
Yeah.
not even thinking of taking care of them, because for some reason, so many have developed this concept that humanity and helping via social programs is wrong. That if they are on their own, by gosh, they're going to have to either pull themselves up by the bootstraps and get out there and get a job. Well, you know what? You've not had to do that.
Right.
You don't have a clue,
Yeah.
not a clue of what it's like to live in this world. So why do you judge it that way? Why are you so cruel, so unjust towards the plight of others? Yeah, some could help themselves, yeah, but why is it that we tend to lump everybody into the category of abusers of the system? It's the same thing with immigration. Now we've lumped them all, thanks to our president, as rapists and criminals and drug addicts. And those little kids that are right now on their own without their parents, who are 2 and 5 and 10 years old, in those places that they've deemed safe for them, they've taken away the most important thing for those kids, and that's the comfort of their mother and their father.
Right.
And that is, if you're a Christian, it's not Christian. If you're not a Christian, if you're just an
immoral.
atheist,
It's
you
immoral.
still know it's not right.
Right, right.
If you are a Muslim, my gosh, you know that's not right. So why are we turning into that monster? Why are we reinforcing inhumanity? I don't understand it.
Where do we go from here with reconciling the legal aspect of immigration with the human conflict of some of our laws? I think a lot of folks defend the building of the wall, border separation, based on, well, don't come here and break the law.
Well, that's what the president said. He said, hey, I know how to fix this, just don't come in here illegally.
Do you think we are looking at immigration as a society and as a government incorrectly, meaning should we be looking at immigration as a criminal issue, or should we be looking at it as a humanitarian issue?
I think we should have laws. Those laws are dated and they're old and they need to be rethought. It should not be a criminal issue.
Right. Well,
It
obviously,
should be a humanitarian.
drug trafficking, human trafficking, those are criminal issues.
Absolutely.
And those things, of course, happen.
Absolutely.
They also happen in Louisville, Kentucky.
Exactly.
They also happen in Chicago, Illinois.
Exactly.
So obviously we know that we have to protect our borders from those kinds of criminal activity. But to change the mindset and the culture around immigration from a criminal issue to a humanitarian one, obviously we have to have a border, we have to have laws, but to lump all of those folks seeking asylum, a better way of life for their kids, for their families, into that group of true criminals is, again, unholy and immoral.
Yeah.
So do you think we could shift the mindset around that and think about it being a humanitarian issue?
I would think so, but I think it's going to take a long, long time. This news cycle of 24/7 news, and everybody is, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and we are all set. We go towards the comfort of what we know.
Right.
I think the key is that we have to break that.
Yeah.
We have to go beyond our comfort zone.
Yeah.
We have to be open to change. And I think order and fear of change is what's guiding a lot of this, and I'm going to say white America, siding with the most horrific, and using that as an example, the most horrific aspect of immigration. I think that we fear change and order. We see now that the orderly world of whatever it was in our country 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it's now turning upside down. It's a topsy-turvy world, you know? It's like a rabbit hole. We're all like going woo, 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 woo. And instead of fearing it and being encouraged to fear it, we need to somehow educate through how. I mean, my gosh, take American kids, take them to the horse races and see who is it that cleans up that horse crap.
Yeah.
Who is it? Who works in look around. Who takes care of the roofing? And these people are hard workers. You gotta just give them a chance.
Yeah,
and
they're
give them,
integral to the structure of our society.
Exactly.
And the structure of our economic system as well.
And this idea that they're taking our jobs, you know what? I don't know of many people that would be climbing in this heat, going up there and hammering.
Yeah.
Those jobs are there. But so many don't want it.
Right.
So you know, it's just I don't know. I don't have the answer, but we do have to start with the laws, and they have to be altered somehow to take into this. Starting with give those DACA kids citizenship.
Yeah.
They deserve it. Give it to them.
Yeah.
They are going to educate their own kids. They're going to be the future of this country because, like it or not, they're going to grow to be 50-year-olds and they're going to be voting. So it's just.
And those kids truly are a part of us.
They're
part
us.
of our. They're sewn into the fabric of our identity now.
Of what we stood for and what that Statue of Liberty stands for.
And for what some of us still stand for, and some of us still fight for. I think we as a society have to be well read and informed and choose politicians that are going to defend the morality of an immigration policy that has some soul to it, that has a human, has some humanity to it. But you know, it doesn't start, it doesn't begin and end with policy, with politicians. It's part of our responsibility as a community to talk to our neighbors and talk to our family and talk to our friends.
Absolutely.
And maybe have some tough, open dialogue about it. A lot of people don't want to sit down at the kitchen table and talk politics. But this isn't a political issue. This is a human issue. This is a situation where people are really dying. They're drowning coming over on boats. They're being murdered and killed by gangs and cartels trying to survive. And we've got to have the tough conversations in our own communities. If we wait for legislators to do it, we might be waiting another 100 years.
No, if ever. Yeah. It won't happen. I just don't have an answer.
Yeah.
I just know that I wake up upset every day.
What?
You know, it just blows my mind. I just.
What gives you hope?
I think what gives me hope is that I know so far we have a system of check and balances in this country that seems to be working.
Yeah.
And that we have restricted our elections happen every 4 years, sometimes every 2, and locally, and that we have a turnover, that there is this freedom, if you vote and participate and get involved, to be able to actually know that your vote counts. And I hear so many times they say, I don't vote because my vote doesn't count, and that's BS.
Yeah.
That one of the proudest moments of my life was when I became an American citizen, and I was first able to vote. And I've never missed a vote since then.
Yeah.
And I know that so many just don't vote.
Yeah.
You know, in our state, we elected a governor, whether you're with him or not with him, by 16% of the population. That's the only percentage of the population that got involved in that major election. So, there you go. It has to be community based. It has to be education. Our educational system needs to do the service that it's supposed to do, to educate kids, not to brainwash them one way or the other, but to expose them to the realities. And I do feel that for example, at the college level, it's different. My students that are Anglo, let's say Anglo, are mixed with students that are not. And at that level, I see hope.
Yeah.
You ask me what
Yeah.
gives me hope.
Yeah.
I see hope that this generations right now,
I do too.
those issues that are our big issues that we carry over,
Yeah.
it's disintegrating for them.
Yeah.
They don't feel that way.
No.
And I love seeing interracial couples.
Yeah.
I love seeing the dating that goes back and forth. I love seeing all that. And I'm sure that their maybe parents may not be too happy. Maybe their great grandparents or great, but kids nowadays are more integrated into this. And I think that gives me hope. I have hope in education
Yeah.
and in the breaking that of barriers, whether it's immigration, whether it's gay rights, whether it's whatever. These kids are more open-minded, and that gives me hope.
Yeah. In some of
So-
our community discussions, we have some young people, and they are true advocates for whatever we're discussing. They have become the biggest voice in our country.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
collectively, I think they are powerful and influential and inspiring, even to me. And I think that is the hope of
That's a
tomorrow.
hope.
Yeah.
That's a hope.
What do you say to those kids? I shouldn't call them kids, young adults, that may feel the pressure and the backlash from other people their age or even older, adults that have a different ideology around this subject? What do you say to them? What do you say to them that will inspire them and cause them to continue the fight?
I don't know that I can say. I don't know, because sadly, sometimes then they just go back and settled into the life that they have known. With whatever it was in their home that was an issue, and with their great grandparents. Sadly enough, a lot of these kids that are so open-minded right now do go back home and they regress. What do I say to them? I say keep learning, keep experiencing, keep evolving, because at 21 you are not going to be the same person that you are at 31 or at 41 or at 51, because I am certainly not like that little 13-year-old
Right.
that left Cuba.
Right.
I have a lot
Yeah.
of those feelings
Yeah.
and reinforcement of that I am Cuban and I am American, and I can have both cultures in my life.
Right.
I'm not melting them.
Right.
And I think that is what we have to do. You just keep saying to them, keep evolving, keep changing. Do not say I am this way at 21, because life isn't like that.
What do
You know.
you say to the 13-year-old little girl that left Cuba 57 years ago, that turned into a very productive, inspiring member of our community? What do you say to her the day she left, when she was so afraid? What do you say to her and the other kids around our country that need to feel safer, that need to have more hope? What do you say to them that gets them to the next day?
I think that there is always going to be somebody. I had that one somebody in my life. There's always going to be somebody that's going to reinforce that is going to help them. There's
Yeah.
always kindness. There are people that care. And that you have to kind of, from being 13 and being vulnerable to becoming a tough cookie, to letting some things roll off, and to have these goals that someone, whether it was your parents and your grandparents or your life experience, that you can get and rise above anything that life throws at you.
Because you did.
Just because I did.
Because you did.
Because I did.
Yeah.
Whatever.
What doesn't matter around this issue? What doesn't matter?
What doesn't matter? What doesn't matter about this issue? I don't know the answer. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by what doesn't matter.
Well, there's so much that matters.
I
What
think
do we
maybe
need what do we need to abandon? What do we need to abandon?
we need to abandon
move forward.
categorizing people and this obsession that we have with putting everybody and everything in a category.
Yeah.
I think that you have to abandon that and just look at humans face to face and accept their differences, accept the reality that their culture might be different. Even if they live in the United States, they're still going to keep those black beans and rice going on at home.
Right.
They're not going to be eating hot dogs and hamburgers every day.
Right.
You got to get past that. You've got to let people be who they are and meet them and then become stronger that way, you know?
And be a part of them.
And be a part of them too. And they be a part of you. And that's
Yeah.
how I think everybody wants it to be.
I think that's the only answer, and it goes back to the premise of what we're trying to do through Conversations That Matter is let's get to know our neighbors. Let's get to know the least among us, the most vulnerable, the folks that have been cast aside. Let's get to know them and understand their plight and their struggles and their challenges. And we're going to find so many things that we have in common, with them,
absolutely.
because we have way more in common than
Then
we have different.
differences. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. I love you.
I love you too.
You are one of the biggest inspirations in my life.
Oh my gosh. Big head. Wrong. I'm blushing. I'm just suntanned.
my work in nonprofit, you inspired by letting me be part of your charity probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, been a long time.
Your courage to speak out on important issues that truly affect the lives of people inspires me. And you're not ready to give up the baton just yet, but there's a lot of people like myself. We're going to be standing and waiting, and we'll take it.
You better. It's got to be passed on.
We will.
We got to care.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be important. You
I
got to
love
be
you,
involved.
and thanks for having this conversation
Thank you
with
for
me.
inviting me. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to our audience, and thanks to our production team here. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to listen to Conversations That Matter. I hope you'll share our stories with your family and friends. And like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can catch us on YouTube. So thanks again, and until next time, take care.